This is the homework helper for Chapter 5, Section 7 in the 7th grade workbook, Slope-Intercept Form. So let's look at the first two questions here. They're asking me to find the x and the y intercepts. So remember, the x-intercept is simply where the graph goes over the x-axis. The y-intercept is simply where does the graph go over the y-axis. So if I look at question number 1, I want to say, where does the graph go over the x-axis? Well, it goes over the x-axis here at 8. So the x-intercept has to be 8. Then I say, where does it go over the y-axis? Well, it goes over the y-axis down here at -10. So the y-intercept must be -10. So that's our answers. X-intercept here is 8. The y-intercept is -10. You know, do the same thing in question number 2. Tell me where it goes across the x-axis. Tell me where it goes across the y-axis. All right, let's look at the next set of questions here. In the next set of questions, they're asking me to graph the equation. And all these equations are in slope-intercept form. That's why the topic here is slope-intercept form. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 3. I'll give you a hint on 4, but I'm going to do number 3 with you. Number 3 is 1 1/3 x plus 2. Now, first thing we always want to check is to make sure that these guys are in form. And indeed, this is in y equals mx plus b form. How do we see that? Well, we see y equals is all by itself on the left side, and then after the equal sign, we've got something with x, and then kind of a stray number out here at the end. All right, let me remind you what these things mean. There's 2 of these things that will be numbers. M represents the slope of the line we're about to graph. So that's going to be the rise and the run, as we saw in an earlier section. B represents the y-intercept. That's where the graph goes across the y-axis at. Those are the 2 things we need as numbers. Well, we do have that here. All right, we're going to plot the y-intercept first. Out here at this one, it says plus 2 at the end. So we're going to treat that like positive 2. If it said minus, we treat it as negative. If it said plus a negative, we treat it as negative. But this just says regular old plus, so we're going to treat that like it goes through the axis at positive 2. Now notice here, for whatever reason, they decided to make this graph goes by 3s. So the first jump is 1.5, so you need to go a little bit past that to get up to 2. Okay, y-axis here, or slope rather. Slope here is 1 1/3. You want to write slope as its own fraction, not a mixed number. You want to write that as an improper fraction. You know how to do that. 4/3. All right, well, slope of 4/3 means I'm going to rise 4 and run 3. So from the point I have already made, not back to the origin, from the point I just made, I'm going to rise 4. Well, if I'm at 2 and I go up 4, that puts me to 6. And then I'm going to run 3. That means I'm going to go to the right 3, which now puts me over on the x-axis at 3. I put my other point, I connect my points, and now I've graphed my line. You'll do the same approach in 4 and 5. The only thing I want to caution you about in number 4 is that there's nothing in front of x here. Since there's nothing in front of x, you want to treat that as 1. And of course, you want to do that as a fraction form because slope is rise over run. So when you do slope in question number 4, do the slope as 1 over 1. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the concluding questions here, 6 and 7, where they're asking me to write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. So, if we go ahead and take a look at this one, we'll go ahead and look at number 6. All right, we need that general equation again, y equals mx plus b form. And again, I need 2 components. I need to calculate the slope, and I need to tell you where it crosses over the y-axis in order to be successful here. Again, that is m and b in the equation. And x and y are just going to end up saying x and y. If you look at all 3 of those equations up the top there in 3, 4, and 5 that we just looked at, x and y, x and y, x and y. They're going to say x and y intentionally, right? They're always going to say x and y. The things that are going to change into numbers in this form are m and b. Remember, m represents the slope, so we're going to be calculating the rise over run there. B represents the y-intercept, where the graph crosses over the y-axis at. So looking at this one here, I'll start off with the y-intercept number here. Where does the graph go over the y-axis at number 6? Well, it goes over the y-axis here at negative 12. So the b number here is going to change into negative 12. All right, then I need to find my slope. My slope is my rise and my run to go from one point to the other here. All right, you can do any 2 points on the graph you want. Again, ideally you want something that goes through grid markers, so it's really easy to calculate. Well, we see that point there that we've already worked with, that's the y-intercept, and I see this point up here. So we're going to calculate the rise and the run from those points there. All right, we'll go from here up to this point. That's a rise of 12. And then as far as going to the right there, now this is where this is going to get tricky. Notice the x-axis jumps, even though it's numbered by 3s, are actually jumps equivalent to 1.5 because only every other line is marked. So the slope here would be equivalent to 12 over 1.5. Well, you know that's going to be problematic for us because I can't write 1.5 in a fraction. Not going to be allowed. But we can fix it easy. Easiest way to do this is to now come up with an equivalent fraction. All I'm going to do is double that fraction, implying I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 2. I'm writing an equivalent fraction, so it equals the same thing. Right? And when I double 1.5, obviously the decimal is going to go away because 1.5 times 2 changes into 3. So when I double this fraction, I end up with 24 over 3. Right? And even though that's a big fraction, I could work with that. Now you can probably see much easier, though, that 24 over 3 reduces. 24 over 3 actually reduces down to 8. So my slope here is 8. And that's the other number I need because now I have my slope and my y-intercept. So my equation here is y equals 8x plus negative 12. Do the same thing in number 7. Tell me where it goes across the y-axis. That's going to be this b value. Then tell me the slope, how much you have to rise and run to get to the other point. Again, you can pick any point you want for that other point as long as you're working left to right.